All right, good morning.
Morning, Dave.
How's it going?
Good.
Good.
Nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you. So, uh, take it away. So, tell me about yourself and how did we get into this?
We're together here because I think we first met through Third Act, and then I volunteer with Third Act, and as you know, specialize in sort of home electrification. And I'm also a coach with Go Electric, just starting to do that. And you had a lot of interaction with them as well on your project. So,
Right.
Yeah, my interest in home electrification is really something where I think as individuals you can have a big impact on the environment, a positive impact, and it's something you can actually do. And I think it's rewarding and makes you feel a little bit better about the environment and doing something to help. So tell me a little bit about what got you interested in it and your background a little bit.
Well, so yeah, I've been kind of going electric for a while. In 2019, I bought an electric car. 2021, I put solar on the house. So I've been producing more electricity than I've been using since then. But I really want to go. My goal was to go carbon neutral and get rid of natural gas in the house and just have as low footprint as possible on the environment as I leave this world for my kids.
Awesome.
So anyway, so that's my kind of driving force behind this. So,
yeah, we hear that so often with Third Act volunteers is everybody's thinking about their kids and their grandkids,
right?
Doing a little bit something to improve it. So when you got started, let me ask you just how you felt about it. What were you concerned about any issues? Was there a little bit of anxiety about jumping in, or were you feel pretty comfortable about it all?
I did feel fairly comfortable that it could be done. I had a lot of questions at the beginning. For example, how would the heat pump, would it fit in my existing space? This basically my gas furnace and water heater was in a little closet in the laundry room. Did I have the space to do it? What were the logistics of it going to be? That was more of a worry than the technology.
Yeah. Okay. And how did you get comfortable with all that? Just getting after it, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, it's getting after it. Talking to you and the other people, Go Electric people, having a little meeting, and then going into, I knew it was going to be a bit of a process, getting some different bids and stuff like that, and it did become that part was very interesting because all four of the contractors that I talked to all had a different kind of take on it.
Yeah.
And whether would I need to upgrade my panel, what size of heat pump would I need, that kind of stuff. Everybody has kind of their own individual take on things.
Yeah, it's in doing this work, it's very interesting that every home is different, right? So they all present some challenges. But I'm not a technical guy. Don't have an engineering background, but it's interesting to me that you can really overcome a lot of those barriers with just taking a look at it, getting some advice from people who've been through it, and I think it gives everybody a little bit more of a comfort level once they do dive in.
Right, and I think I was lucky because I had a contractor who I felt very comfortable with, who was passionate about this, and really wanted to do a good job. So that helped with the comfort level.
Yeah, we experienced that a lot where. Even in my own house and doing stuff, it's interesting how you just get a good feel for the contractor. I know at Go Electric we recommend, various ones who have some experience with it, which is very important to know that they've had some experience with this, because like a lot of contractors, the one thing they don't want is callbacks, and so sometimes one of the easier things to do is to sort of downplay whatever the project is so that it's a little safer, right? Now, I think what we're finding is once these things are installed properly, they're just as reliable, work just as well as traditional gas appliances. So we haven't seen a lot of callbacks and so forth. So I think that's good.
One of the things that was a force for me was that my furnace was probably pushing 30 years old. So at some point it was going to need to be replaced, and it was not particularly efficient because it was an older furnace. So I really wanted to do it now where there were a lot of rebates in place, so I could replace it at, and already have the savings of not replacing, $6, $7, $8,000 to replace a gas furnace.
Yeah.
That's kind of built into it. My water heater was not quite as old, but still it was, 15, 16 years old. So at some point it would need to be replaced as well.
Yeah. I did the same. My equipment hadn't failed, but it was 25 years old, so it was only a matter of time.
And when do you think it's going to fail?
Yeah, that's usually when family's visiting over the holidays.
Yeah, or when it's 0 degrees outside.
Yeah,
so
we're one thing we're trying to help people with is to tell them you can have kind of an electrification plan. Right. You can have a menu of parts and pieces that you can do. If it's the hot water heater, if it's the heat pump for cooling and heating, if it's solar, if it's storage, if it's just as simple as an induction stove, right? But if you have that plan in place, then when the emergency hits, when it's 0 degrees, you know the steps to take. That's not the time to educate yourselves on this process.
Exactly. And it's going to be interesting to see how this works out with the electricity I'm producing. I'm hoping to be able to produce enough on my roof to run the heat pump and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the plan going into the future.
Well, I know you have a pretty big system on your house, so hopefully that's the case. I got to admit, I was pretty shocked at the load that my heat pump, required, and therefore how much higher my electricity bill went. So we're a little reluctant to say you're going to really save money necessarily on operating expenses on a monthly basis. Now, as things change and if gas gets more expensive, if you can produce your own power like you do with the solar, it makes the economics a little bit better. But I don't think we should overpromise on the savings side.
It does get complicated, especially with the where Excel's charging more. What's
time of use?
Time of use.
Yeah.
How do you kind of work that into your plan and that kind of thing too? I mean, just before I came up here, I made sure I ran my dishwasher and started my dryer.
Yeah.
So that they're done before 1 PM.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think these time of use rates are actually beneficial to those of us who are adopting some of this smart technology, which can have schedules and it can be automated so that you don't have to think about it quite so much, right? I think that's where it's headed. So, and it's also, I think, another benefit to this. We're talking a lot about the personal side of it, but it should help the grid, right? If we can get some smart technology and efficient technology that runs at the proper times, so that we're not using energy during the peak load. That would be helpful for everyone in the community.
Yeah, and then and if you have an electric car and you're charging your car too, I mean, I know I've had my car. I've had my Leaf. It'll be 6 years at the end of the month, and the amount of gas I've saved, and I trickle charge in my garage, is pretty significant over 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a factor as well.
Yeah, the whole, if you can get rooftop solar, EV charging, somehow maybe some storage, and then electrification is really the holy grail. And I know they tend to call it a virtual power plant, which sounds a little intimidating, as if I actually have a power plant here in my house. But the whole idea is to be able to use that energy yourself and help supplement the grid when necessary. So that's where we're headed. But let's talk a little bit about the specifics of your project. And as you got into it, what were some of the pros? What were some of the cons? Can you kind of tell everybody what your thoughts are?
So the first thing I had done about a year ago was a blower door test, and had some folks come out who are associated with Excel to look at my house and see where I was losing heat and that kind of thing. And it turns out my house was probably about average for a house that was built in the late 60s, which means insulation was not first and foremost on their mind when they built this house.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I did. And then before I put in the heat pump and water heater, I did have come out and blow in insulation and foam the attic to make it more insulated. It got up to about R value of 60
Wow.
in the attic.
Great.
And then also had cellulose blown into the walls, which it's the original insulation, which was not performing that well, and they weren't that careful about the insulation at that point anyway. So I think that immediately that would have helped my overall gas usage right off the bat. So that was the first thing I did. Then in terms of the project, I knew I wanted a hot water heater, electric heat pump water heater, and heat pump, and also I have a what you could call a utility room, or a room that was a patio at one point, which is not ducted, and so I wanted to look at doing a mini split out there to keep that room warm and or cool, depending on the time of year. So
and just so folks know, and that's a great solution, a mini split for an area that isn't ducted in your house, where I think you can relate it to maybe a hotel room you stay in, and you might see these units on the ceiling and they cool and they heat, but there's no ducting. It just comes directly out of that unit on the wall, usually close to the ceiling, and then it has an outdoor condenser unit.
Right, and it's designed specifically for that room.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I did was I'm not sure where I got all my contacts, but I did get 4 different bids. Things that I was concerned right off the bat were, would I have to upgrade my electrical panel? Because I had a 100 amp that was standard in the neighborhood when the house was built. What size of heat pump would I need? So I was getting, ranges anywhere from 2 ton to 3 ton, and a couple of 2.5 tons were included. So I needed to know how big a unit I wanted. I needed to know, would I need electric resistance heating backup inside the heat pump? So there were some moving parts with that. As it turned out, I did upgrade my panel to a 200 amp. Besides the heat pump, all the new electric that I was putting in, I do charge my car, and I have a hot tub, which is electric too. So I do have quite a bit of demand. So I thought that added several $1,000s to the project, but I thought it was probably a good thing to do. It was interesting to have all the different vendors each have their own kind of take on, what I needed and how long it would take and that kind of stuff. So.
And usually that's a step where at Go Electric, we like to review them with you and kind of walk through some of the details so that you can understand them a little bit better, apples to apples.
And that was super helpful, just to have somebody who I knew was nonpartisan, so to speak, give me some feedback.
Right.
Yeah. So that was super helpful.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, anything, surprises, things that came up that you really didn't expect, or?
Well, part of the process was, for me, was also looking at rebates. So the one surprise that happened right in the midst of deciding whether to go with the mini split as well, is the city of Denver reduced their rebates from $3,500 to $1,200 for the mini split. So how that all worked out in evaluating those things was a little bit of a surprise. The only other major surprise, not really major, but when they were installing the heat pump, was the ductwork and making sure that how it fit into the same space as the gas furnace and how the duct worked. So Stephen, my contractor, ended up doing a lot of extra work with the ductwork, and in theory it should make it much more efficient, actually.
So that was just in your mechanical room, though. They didn't have to modify any ductwork
No.
throughout your house.
No,
use
just
the same forced air ductwork that you had been using with your furnace.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And interestingly, some of I think you met one of my neighbors who they have boilers. Several of my neighbors have boilers,
Yeah.
which is a completely different scenario then, right?
Mhm. Yeah. So they have baseboard hot water heat.
Right.
Yeah. That right now for us is a much harder transition than the forced air ductwork from a typical furnace that some people had. Well, speaking of your neighbors and just friends and family, I hope you're an evangelist with this,
Yeah.
and you're always promoting it, because it seems like people who do it get very excited about it,
Right.
want to tell everybody. What's the reaction been from neighbors and friends and family?
So a couple neighbors that I had over, both who have boilers right now, were very interested in it. It's interesting to see, there's a hesitancy to make a big change like this in your house. I mean, I had a reasonable amount of hesitancy, I think, but really wanted to do it, so jumped on it. But my neighbors, I think, eventually will come around. Now, it depends on how long you want to be in the house. My other next door neighbors, who are, I think, probably close to 80, and I talked to them about solar before, and they never thought it would pay back. So there's that piece of it too.
Yeah. Well, I do some work in the commercial field as well, and one thing, of course, owners in commercial buildings, it's all about the math and the payback, right? So,
right.
What I like to say is that you're also improving your asset, right?
Right.
So if you were to sell your house, even if you were 80 or your kids did or whatever, the buyer's going to come in and say, holy cow, you've got rooftop solar, you've got heat pumps, you've got all these things. This has all been improved.
Right.
This is not something, as a new buyer, and probably most of the older homes that are in your neighborhood or my neighborhood, they're looking at, we got to redo everything. So you can maybe justify it as an improvement that you're going to get the dollars back at a sale, hopefully.
There definitely is value added. I don't know what a normal Excel bill would be in my neighborhood right now, because I've had solar for 4 years. But I would imagine that if you didn't have solar and heat pump, you're probably averaging several $100s a month.
Right.
Depending on how efficient your house is and how do you want to keep it and how cool do you want to keep it in the summer. And I'm hoping that mine will be very, very low.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's touch on the rebates and incentives and tax credits. Obviously, you and I are here talking at the end of May, which has not been the most joyous time in the environmental movement for the big ugly bill that was just passed in the House, and a lot of those, at least federal incentives, are going away. But it's interesting because when you talked about the surprises and the rebate changing on the mini split, but interestingly, Excel has actually increased their rebates on heat pumps. It's now, I think, $2,200 a ton, where it was like about $2,500 just total for the heat pump, no matter what. So some things are getting so some local municipalities, cities, counties, utilities, states, the incentives are still there, and it's still beneficial. It is a little challenging to figure them all out, and even at Go Electric or Third Act, we don't typically kind of get into that. We ask the homeowner to do that.
Right. And my contractor is doing all of that stuff now. So I'm not an expert on this, and of course my case is very unique and it won't apply to everybody's case. But I did state of Colorado and the city of Denver, where I live, both had rebates right off the top that my contractor could take. Excel works differently. I should be getting checks in the mail from Excel. I already got my checks for the installation project. So those came about 4 or 5 weeks after I did the installation, um, and made it quite affordable actually to do it. I should be getting in the neighborhood of about 10 grand of checks from Excel, which will help bring the cost of the total project down to still more than just if I had to replace my gas furnace.
Right.
But it definitely makes it within range of making it nice upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, my situation is different than anybody else's. And then there's a federal tax credit on top, which I'll have to see how much that applies to my taxes as well.
Right. Well, you're probably very happy you did it when you did it.
I think so. Yes.
There's going to be a little rush here in the
Yeah.
in the fall here for people to get rooftop solar on and do whatever they can.
Right, so they
to
can
their
take
homes.
advantage of it.
I
yeah.
feel sorry for these contractors who are probably got to, ramp up for this big push that's going to happen now. And
Right.
then we don't know yet. I mean, but 2026 it could slow down quite a bit, which would be a shame. But
It would be yeah.
I still think the economics with a lot of the local incentives and stuff still makes sense. So I hope people still consider it, and that to not be disillusioned by what's going on right now.
Yeah, I think my sense of it is that the push towards home electrification will continue regardless of, drill baby drill kind of
Right.
mentality.
Well, I think something that I never really thought that much about is the indoor health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just getting rid of the fossil fuels and the pollutants and everything that are in your house is a big plus as well. And I think people feel very comfortable about that.
Yeah.
Once they do it.
And I feel like I've done this, and I should get, basically, 20 good years at least out of the heat pump. I'm getting now air conditioning in the summer, which I had a swamp cooler before.
Nice.
And I can get rid of the swamp cooler. So that should be nice too.
So Dave, after going through all this, tell me what advice would you have for a homeowner who's thinking about electrifying?
I definitely think using the resources like Go Electric, and talking to people who've been through the process is super important to get just a scope of what the work would have to look like ahead of time. You definitely would want to have at least probably 3 bids. I did 4, and really feel comfortable with your contractor. I also think having, like we talked about before, having the plan done ahead of time, just so you could know the scope of the work, and evaluate, where it's going to be with rebates and tax incentives and stuff like that ahead of time. Super important.
Yeah.
Just the whole process of going electric from your car to rooftop solar to changing out some of the appliances that you may have in your house to make it more efficient. You can start, if you have a gas stove, gas oven, that's something that can be done independently. It doesn't have to all be done at once.
Right. I think that's a great point. I assume you got an energy audit.
I did.
So, and then Excel's got this new program. Excel seems to be changing it quite frequently. But if you sign up for their whole home efficiency application,
Right.
the first step, which is required, is an energy audit. Now, from what we're seeing, those can range from about $100 to $160 or so to get it done. But
Right.
I think that's a good first step.
Yeah, I paid $100 a year ago, January,
Yeah.
and it may be more now. I'm not sure.
So it has the thermal imaging where you can see where some of the leaks are.
Right.
It has the blower door test. an interesting requirement of getting the incentives from Excel, at least some of them, it sort of varies depending on the piece of equipment, is you actually have to improve your blower door test, I believe 25%. So it'll be a good baseline for you to have
Right.
when you get it done. I think they say new construction now might be a 3 to 4. I'm trying to remember the acronym ACH or whatever their metric is, right? And for example, my house was, I think, close to like an 8 or something. So, if you get your house, you have a fairly new house and it's only, it's already a 4, so it's a pretty tight house, then you might have a little problem, obviously reducing it 20-25%, whatever
Right.
it is. So
Right.
something to think about.
The other thing that I know that is top of mind is, what about those few days a year where it's 0 degrees or -5 or -10? We don't get those, once a winter, maybe,
Right.
maybe twice. So being concerned about how the heat pump is going to work, and how do you, for that 24 or 36 hours, how do you keep your home warm enough? I do have a fireplace, and I do plan to put in a new kind of high efficiency blower motor, so can definitely heat the house somewhat with that. But there's also the built-in, you may know the terminology, the heat strips that are inside.
Yeah. Resistance
Yeah, heating,
right.
which is super inefficient, but when it's 0 degrees outside, you're not that concerned about. You want your house to stay at least somewhat warm, right?
Well, I elected to, or they had convinced me when I did it. First of all, the problem was when I did it, there was not a cold climate heat pump, which
right.
everyone should get now.
Right.
So mine has a tendency to not function properly when it gets really cold. Now that's been eliminated now with cold climate heat pumps, but I kept my gas furnace in place.
Okay.
So that's my supplemental
backup. And you had the space to do that.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So my air handling unit is basically, for the heat pump, is on top of where the furnace was. But you bring up a good point. I think it gives you a little sense of comfort if you have a little bit of a kind of a backup
cushion
or something, to help you out. So
I'm
glad you brought that up.
Even though the unit I have should be quite efficient down to -5. I mean, that's what the specs say. But it's not the same as just being able to crank your gas furnace up at the same time. So
let me ask you one of the things that I experienced, and we've had other customers experience, and it may be the heat pump, or it could be the heat pump hot water heater, is noise. Because one thing I think we should mention is, and I think people get a little surprised, because these heat pumps sort of run on a very slow, basis almost constantly.
They're designed to do that.
Right, as opposed to your furnace, which you always notice, it just kicked on when you had a gas furnace, and all of a sudden this hot air's coming out of your registers, right? These run pretty constantly. And we've heard less complaints about obviously because the heat pump is exterior, but folks who have the heat pump hot water heaters inside their home, they can be a little louder than obviously what their gas hot water heater was. Any thoughts about that, or have you had any experience?
No, I have noticed that the fan that's inside runs more than the fan with my furnace did. But in terms of noise, I haven't had any issues with the water heater at all.
Good.
And it's just, it's been a month now, and I'm just completely used to it. My furnace actually was pretty loud when it kicked on.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's because it was older or why, but I'd say overall my noise level is lower than it was. I do notice the fan being on more.
Right.
This time of year, it still runs and it kicks in once in a while. My furnace would not have been on at all because I have it set to 62 or whatever.
Right, and I think the nature of the heating that comes out of your registers now, it's very subtle warm, right?
Yes.
It's not that, burning fossil
Right.
fuels warm.
No, it's not.
So you need to kind of get a sense of that, right? Like, I know my wife initially, she was like, "Hey, this thing's like blowing out cold air," and I go, "Well, it's just blowing air. It's not
Yeah.
cold. It just feels kind of cold because it's just air moving, right?"
Right. And my twins have noticed the difference. They say, "Dad, it's cold in here. Can we turn the heat on?" It's like, well, we could, but it's not going to be like it was before, where it just gets warm all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was the first couple weeks. That I haven't heard that recently, so I'm sure
Well,
that's getting used to it.
Yeah, so one thing about that is just placement of these, like my heat pump. Not knowing that, I put it right under our bedroom window, because that's where the pad was for the old AC condenser.
Right.
So they just said, "Oh, let's just put it here."
Right.
So something to consider where you're placing the equipment. The other thing that can be done and people can think about is with the heat pump hot water heater, it can actually be ducted. Right. Yours, I think, isn't ducted because you have a nice big mechanical room where there's plenty of air that it's using to really extract the heat to heat the water.
Right.
But if you have to duct it out to somewhere, that is possible, and I think that might mitigate the noise a little bit if it's ducted into a crawl space or wherever it might be.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and the heat pump, the water heater has been great. I mean, I think we had to turn it up 5 degrees from the initial setting when the plumber put it in. But
and the newer ones have mixing valves where you can keep it much hotter in the heat pump, but then it'll mix a little cool with a little hot water so that you get 100 degrees or whatever you like coming out of your faucets. The other thing we should probably mention is, if people are familiar with a recirc pump on their hot water heater with gas, which is constantly kind of circulating the hot water throughout your home, so when you're in your master bath and it's the furthest from your hot water heater, you turn on your faucets and boom, it's hot water. You can't do that with a heat pump, so you might have to wait
right, and I
a few
didn't,
seconds or whatever.
and I did not have that with my old water heater, so that was didn't take any getting used to. There was something else I was going to mention about that. Oh, of course, it comes with a smart thermostat too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nice feature where you can set it on vacation mode and a lot of stuff. You can set it from anywhere in the world as long as you have internet.
Right.
So that and how to use the heat pump is a little bit different than a furnace. You want it to keep a nice steady temperature in your house, whether it's heating or cooling.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great to meet you. I've enjoyed going through the process with you, and this is going to be good to spread the word.